So a new school term has recently begun, and Rishi Sunak's government has once again failed to produce guidance on how schools should deal with children who say they are transgender. A couple of months ago, the government had actually floated banning social transitioning, which is where a child or anyone else essentially declares themselves to be another gender and everyone goes along with it. The school agrees to change that pupil's name and they can wear the opposite uniform. Now the government says, or Rishi Sunak says, he's proceeding with just extreme caution. Candice, it feels like this is not good enough. I mean, this is a very serious issue that the government keeps wanting to punt into the long grass.
Yes. Yeah, well, I mean, schools genuinely need guidance on this. I mean, we can't just rely on judgment or common sense or, what your individual opinion is. It doesn't work that way anymore. So teachers do need to know, do I actually have to quit my job, or will I be forced, will I be compelled to use pronouns, for instance, that I don't want to use? I think that the essence of social transition is that it's social, it involves everybody. So we need to know what's going to happen. I mean, my position on it, I don't think will surprise anyone. I mean, I don't think it's a neutral act. I don't think it should be happening. I do recognize, however, that, in the interest of liberties, people should be able to pursue things that they genuinely want to pursue. But, parents and teachers need to know. And I feel like at the moment, because we're just before an election, they're avoiding controversy and they're sort of trying to pitch at the centre ground, this illusory centre ground that they think exists. And, this actually going to cause a lot of problem for parents who've been campaigning on this for so long and are so disappointed about it.
And I guess that's the point, is that there's so much going wrong in schools at the moment, Tom. What is happening without guidance is just crazy, with children being socially transitioned behind parents' backs, for instance.
And that was one of the things that sparked this. It wasn't the fact that people were concerned about where this might go. There were revelations, as you say, of young children being socially transitioned behind their parents' backs. You add to that the context of the fact that we have been seeing kind of PSHE lessons or things of that nature, or outside organisations invited into schools to talk about the gender issue, and therefore to essentially propagandise a particular view on the idea that we have this thing called a gender identity, kind of a bit like a soul, to push these ideas to children.
Yeah.
And then to have policies in place or informal practices in place, which is to allow that child to socially transition without necessarily even talking to the parents about it. This is really quite sinister stuff. This isn't hypothetical. This is something which has been very clear. You also pair that with the sex education fiasco, which has been going on. It's kind of around the same time back in March, Rishi Sunak said, we're going to have this review into what's been going on in terms of sex education, because again, there'd been these revelations about quite young children being shown materials which their parents were not allowed to look at, often on kind of trumped up intellectual property grounds, which no one really bought, around some quite adult stuff. We're talking about masturbation, we're talking about fisting, things of this nature. I feel gross to talk about on this podcast, but it's still the sort of thing where this is something that parents were naturally very concerned about. That review seems like it will never see the light of day. Gillian Keegan, the Education Secretary, has said that they will potentially talk about the recommendations or something, but not the kind of meat of the particular review that has taken place. So again, you have this irony, as Joanna Williams talked about on Spike this week in her column, of this issue of parents being really concerned about what is going on behind their backs in schools, this culture of secrecy which has crept in the name of inclusion, but still, I think, completely phony. And yet the response is more caginess from the government. And what I really don't understand about it, or I suppose I do understand about it, but I think it's shameful, is Sunak does kind of know better. I mean, he's refusing to pick a side more firmly, but I don't think he's a kind of natural wokester by any stretch of the imagination. I think I believe the people who say that he's quite naturally kind of a bit more socially conservative than your average Tory MP, shall we say. And I think, what is it that's stopping him from doing this? As Candice was saying, there's that kind of concern running up to an election, wanting to appeal to the kind of imagined median voter. The median voter is completely on board with taking this stuff on, so that doesn't really wash to me. You even think about the way in which, yes, you're going to upset Stonewall, but the Tory party upset Stonewall by breathing. There are never going to be won over to their particular kind of their perspective. Pink News are never going to write glowing op-eds about what the Tory party is doing in government in relation to this particular issue. And what I think it comes down to is the fact that his own party and his own cabinet, and this has been true for a very long time, are as up to their eyeballs in this gender identity nonsense as any other party. They are the party that is responsible for bringing through potentially the changes to the Gender Recognition Act, which then got quashed. They are the party who have been pushing, from the backbenches as strongly for this ban on supposed trans conversion therapy, which would effectively negate any ability to talk to confused youngsters and try and suggest maybe another path is better. They have been, as we've seen with Gillian Keegan, who has said in an interview that she doesn't think 16 is too young to transition.
Yeah.
On the grounds that when she was 16, she had a job and she was paying tax. And as Joanna was saying, it's not like having a Saturday job. It's actually much more serious and potentially irreversible. So I think it's shameful, but he's effectively throwing vulnerable young children under the bus for the sake of party management.
Yeah.
And that's if that is all it comes down to, I think that is pretty striking.
And to add to that list, it was the Tories who brought in the kind of compulsory PSHE/sex education that has led to schools to seek out all this outside advice as well. So they're totally to blame for it, and they are not taking responsibility for cleaning it up.
They're completely confused. I mean, it's not something you would expect of a Conservative government, but I think it's just having quite a lax attitude to these things, not really managing properly. And I think the point that Tom made is such a good one. Why do people assume that the median voter is just wishy-washy, doesn't really have an opinion? Sometimes the mass view on something can be quite a strong opinion. I mean, it can be quite a definitive opinion. I mean, always trying to find the middle ground, that's not always possible and not desirable, actually.
And in cases like these, finding the middle ground, avoiding confrontation just leaves it open to the most extreme views, actually.
Yes, because they will assert themselves. They've got no problem doing it.
And Tom, do you think we can make any progress on this issue? Are they just not interested in...
It seems like it. I mean, I did wonder whether, because Rishi Sunak doesn't really have much to say for himself at the moment, all of his other pledges are kind of going awry. I mean, yes, people are primarily concerned about inflation and the questions of the border and so on. There are bigger fish to fry, but you did think, perhaps naively, that this would be such an easy, straightforward way to do something which the vast majority of people see as an important issue and see as the Tory party still just about as the one party slightly more likely to do something about it, but he still failed miserably. But I think it does come down to the fact that throughout all this gender critical battle, it has always been about people from outside the political class putting pressure on the political class to do something, whether it's the gender critical feminists, the kind of parents groups which are popping up to challenge some of these materials. That's always been the story, and I have a lot of faith in their ability to make a difference given how much change has happened in even the past couple of years, really.